This event opening remarks will be provided by Sengyu Baek, who is a Deputy Dean of Asian Development Bank Institute. And prior to joining ADBI, he served as Deputy Minister for Planning and Coordination at the Ministry of Economy and Finance of the Republic of Korea. He has over 30 years of economic and development policy experience. Didi Baek, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dina. I am delighted to welcome you all to the ADBI book launch on climate change mitigation, policies and lessons for Asia. This book will discuss mitigation strategies for climate change and offer policy recommendations for Asia. First of all, I would like to thank all speakers and participants from ADBI Annual Conference 2021 for providing their valuable comments, which helped to improve papers, and paper writers for sharing their expertise and contributing to the book. Also, I would like to express my thanks to the ADB President for providing forward for the book, and keynote speaker Warren Evans for sharing his expertise. This book launch also is supported by many ADBI colleagues, especially Peter Morgan, currently Senior Consulting Economist and Advisor to the Dean, and ADBI staff, Kumiko Suzuki and A. Lair, and book editor Dina Ajigalieva and Dil Lord. As you know very well, Asia Pacific is one of the most vulnerable regions to climate change, and impacts are projected to become more intense in the future. Temperatures are rising 2 times faster in Asia than the global average, which is associated with the increased frequency and severity of weather-related natural disasters. Rising sea levels from global warming are eroding arable land in low elevation coastal zones, posing a severe risk to rural livelihood, food security, and commodity exports. By mid-century, rising waters will impact nearly 1 billion people in the Asia-Pacific region. Accordingly, even if we are experiencing and recovering from the COVID pandemic, we should keep our eyes on fluctuations in climate change and their adverse impacts on the environment, and implement sound policies to combat climate change. In this context, the topic of this book is timely and crucial, particularly for Asia and the Pacific. In this webinar, leading researchers, including keynote speakers, co-editors, and the panel will highlight key takeaways from the brand new book, Climate Change Mitigation, Policies and Lessons for Asia. More specifically, leading policy researchers will share their insight on how developing and emerging countries and institutions in the region can advance climate mitigation and finance projects necessary to achieve carbon neutrality and sustain post-COVID-19 recovery. In addition to discussing carbon pricing solutions, the webinar will address the relevant climate change mitigation techniques for each of 4 crucial sectors of the economy: energy, buildings, transport, and agriculture, forestry, and land use. The book is published on ADBI website in free access. Please everyone read our brand new book, and feel free to share the link with your colleagues, friends, and network. The book also has an executive summary for busy readers. I would like to encourage all participants to actively get involved in this event. We highly appreciate all your comments and suggestions, and we will be sure to forward them directly to the appropriate leading expert during the event. Let me conclude by saying that I hope this webinar will enhance our knowledge and insights of climate change mitigation technologies and suggest policy recommendations that can help developing and emerging countries in Asia and the Pacific mitigate the adverse effect of climate change. I would like to wish you all very fruitful discussions. Now, I would like to introduce our keynote speaker, Warren Evans. He is the Special Senior Advisor, Office of the President at the Asian Development Bank. Acting as ADB's climate envoy, Warren provides broad oversight and guidance for ADB's climate operations, including optimizing climate finance scale and impact, mobilizing new and additional technical financial resources, strengthening ADB's external climate partnerships, and engagement with international climate agreements and initiatives, and reinforcing capacity development for climate change operations. Warren has more than 40 years of experience with various multilateral development banks, private organizations, and other international organizations, including ADB and the World Bank, where he helped establish the Climate Investment Fund. He holds a doctorate degree in cleaner production and climate change policy from Erasmus University, Notre Dame in the Netherlands, a master's degree in environmental health engineering from the University of Kansas. Warren Evans, the floor is yours. Evans?
Warren Evans, yeah. ADBI new book, focuses on climate change mitigation solutions, and we put across 4 sectors like energy, building, transport, and agriculture. So what do you think is the importance of climate change mitigation for developing Asia and the Pacific?
Well, first off, congratulations, Dina. It's a pleasure to be with you for this book launch. Really look forward to have an opportunity to actually read the book. I've just had an opportunity to glance through. But congratulations for launching this important publication. The issue of mitigation of climate change in this region and across the globe is of absolute critical importance and urgent. The kinds of climate impacts that we've been seeing in this last couple of years in particular are only going to increase in frequency and intensity over the coming years. So the only way to address that in terms of reducing the frequency and intensity is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. It doesn't matter where on the earth a ton of greenhouse gas is emitted, the impacts on all countries is the same. So it doesn't matter where it's emitted. It also doesn't matter where you reduce the emissions. The benefits for people across the globe are all the same. So that's why it's a global public good. But the impacts are very local. The impacts on vulnerable communities across Asia and Pacific are devastating in many cases. The floods in Pakistan, the typhoons. We've had 2 typhoons here in Philippines in the last month, and there's another one on the way. And these are high intensity storms that have devastating impacts. So these kind of climate events are very local. But again, the mitigation of greenhouse gas emissions, the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions is the only way that we can reduce the threats of these climate impacts. So every country should strive to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. No matter what country it is, they should be seeking to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Most of the developing countries that we work with are not major emitters of greenhouse gas emissions. But as I said, they're highly vulnerable and have low resilience to the impacts. But they're not major sources of GHG emissions. But actually, there are a lot of other reasons why it's very sensible for them to accelerate and scale up their emission reduction programs. In many cases, it's a matter of energy security. So particularly in some of the small island developing countries, which rely on imported diesel, imported bulk oil, it's much more sensible for them to have renewable energy than to rely on these imports. It's much more economic and financially viable for them. The other reason that, in addition to energy security, another reason that it's a good idea to transition from fossil fuels to clean energy is the job creation. A number of jobs are created as a result of the transition from fossil fuels to clean energy at the local level. It reduced costs, as I mentioned. A number of the countries are in a situation of low food security, and actually moving towards climate smart agriculture, which sequesters carbon, and using nature-based approaches to reducing impacts of climate change for adaptation also often sequesters carbon. Both of these are good practices that will reduce the risks of food insecurity. And then finally, in particular in the cities across Asia, whether they are major emitters of GHGs or not, by reducing the emissions from fossil fuel emissions in particular, they'll improve the air quality and thereby the public health conditions in those cities. And as you know, many of the cities across Asia have very serious air pollution problems. So reducing that air pollution has a major local benefit in addition to the global benefits of reducing greenhouse gas emissions.
Warren, many thanks. I especially like that you highlighted the benefits of climate change mitigation, like food security, energy security, job creation, and health. I think those are very important topics for developing Asia. Thanks very much. Another question. So many agree about the importance of carbon pricing for greenhouse gas emission reduction. However, many countries, especially developing countries, are facing challenges with implementation of carbon pricing in their countries. Also, in addition, there are some issues with like low carbon price, carbon leakage, carbon washing. So what do you think is the future of carbon pricing globally and especially in Asia Pacific region?
Well, in my view, carbon pricing and carbon trading or carbon tax are critically important for us to accelerate and scale up the investments needed in low carbon development. Carbon pricing, such as carbon tax, cap and trade, such as emission trading systems, and baseline and crediting mechanism, which is the international carbon markets under Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. These are all well recognized as integral components of the broader climate policy architecture to support countries to enhance climate action. If designed well, carbon pricing instruments can incentivize reduction in the consumption of fossil fuels, making deployment of much needed low carbon technologies more attractive, generate revenue for green recovery and growth, and support energy transition and foster regional cooperation. There's a growing momentum to utilize carbon pricing instruments, not just globally, but also in developing Asia, with several instruments emerging and or implemented at the national level. And ADB is providing support to a number of our developing member countries to actually trial new ways of developing and implementing and scaling up carbon finance, carbon markets at the national level. In addition, with the finalization of the Paris Agreement rulebook, which we hope will be done at this next climate COP in Egypt, there's a growing momentum on operationalizing international carbon markets under Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. Cross-border carbon pricing mechanisms to address carbon leakage, such as through the European Union's Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, are also emerging. So, in summary, my view is that the carbon markets were working before. When in one of my previous lives, I managed a very large carbon finance program. It was working. It was very successful in generating or supporting the investments in renewable energy and a number of other clean energy initiatives. We need to bring that market back. We need it bigger. We need a good, fair price on carbon. We need an effective trading program across the region and across the globe. And I believe that will be instrumental in helping to make some of the new initiatives, such as the energy transition mechanism, which ADB is designing to be implemented in the next couple of years. That will make these kind of initiatives much more feasible and grow more rapidly, be more effective. So carbon markets, carbon pricing is absolutely essential.
Thank you very much, Warren. Last time when we met in Manila, you mentioned the importance of not only short-term solutions, but also long-term solutions for climate change mitigation. Could you please explain? I'm interested in long-term solutions.
Well, one of the challenges that I think every government and every institution like the Asian Development Bank has is that we tend to work on a relatively short planning cycle, 3 years, 4 years. Whereas the kinds of initiatives that are required to actually particularly reduce greenhouse gas emissions at scale take a much longer time period and require a longer time horizon for planning. But when I talk about long-term solutions, that doesn't mean to wait on anything. We need to act now on all of these initiatives. I think that the most important is accelerating and scaling up readily implementable actions. I mentioned the energy transition mechanism a moment ago. These kind of initiatives can be undertaken now. The ETM could be the world's largest decarbonization program and perhaps stimulate the greatest amount of renewable energy of a single program up to now. We need to start now with these kind of programs, even though there are uncertainties, there are risks, and we will learn lessons as we go, but we need to start now, but we need to be thinking long term. It's going to take 10 years, 15 years, 20 years to reach the scale of investments that are required to actually hit net zero. So we need to accelerate the programs that are implementable. We also need to accelerate and scale up access to climate finance. And this is going to take much more than the kinds of mechanisms that we have in place today for climate finance. So we need to get much more innovative, and ADB is working on IFCAP, the Innovative Finance for Climate in Asia and Pacific, which will use a guarantee mechanism to leverage donor money, $1 to $4, $1 in, $4 out, for investments in climate finance. These kind of initiatives need to be piloted. They need to be then refined and scaled up so that over the coming 20 years, there is access by investors for climate finance in climate solutions. Then we need to initiate much more long-term strategic planning. These are not 5-year plans, these are 50-year plans. And we need to understand what the accompanying policy, regulatory, and institutional reforms are required at the country level in order to actually make those long-term strategies work. And then we need to have the capacity built at the country level so that they can actually implement the programs. And then finally, we need to be thinking longer term in terms of budgeting. These kinds of initiatives are going to require confirmed finance, available finance for the long haul, not for the short term. So we need to start now, but be thinking long term. And then finally, I think it's critical that we recognize that no country, no institution like ADB, no think tank, nobody can do this by themselves. We need much more effective partnerships. We need to bring the stakeholders together so that we have the kind of partnerships that have lasting power, that actually can be available to support the implementation of large-scale initiatives over a long period of time.
Many thanks, Warren. Yeah, you not only explained the benefits of climate change mitigation for developing Asia, and also thanks for sharing specific solutions for climate change mitigation, like cross-border adjustment mechanism. You also mentioned energy transition mechanism and IFCAP. And also you highlighted how to do it with partnership and long-term planning. That's very helpful. Thank you very much. So my final question, Actually, I think researchers in this area very interested. So what can they do? Where should they work? And what direction should we take? Do you have any suggestions for future work?
Well, there's no shortage of the kinds of research required to move us along the path to actually accelerate and scale up investments in low carbon and climate resilient development. I think that if I'm looking at it from a practitioner point of view, from ADB's point of view, for example, I think that the key areas where we still see gaps in knowledge that is applicable is on country level risks and opportunities on climate change. So risks of climate impacts. What are the most important areas that we should be working on in terms of climate adaptation and resilience in the near term, the midterm, and the long term? How do you make decisions on whether you use a 10-year, 20-year, 30-year, 40-year planning horizon when you're investing in adaptation? These are very critical decisions because they have a big impact on the cost of actions. Similarly, what are the greatest opportunities at the country or other levels for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, for moving towards low carbon development, climate smart agriculture, e-mobility, renewable energy, and so on? What are the greatest opportunities, and what are the most logical and achievable and financially viable undertakings that should be looked at first, and then in the midterm and the long term? So thinking through the country level risks and opportunities from a strategic planning level, I think is of a critical need in most of the countries where we work. Similarly, there are a lot of regional and sub-regional risks and opportunities, which I think are even less well understood. Climate change impacts don't stop at national borders. And we know that there are many, for example, in Asia, there are many river systems that are shared among countries, and those water resources are going to be affected over time in a very major way by climate change. So what are the kind of regional and sub-regional partnerships and initiatives that need to be built to actually address the kinds of risks and opportunities over the coming decade? That'd be the second area. And then I think there are a lot of technical areas that still require research, and most of this would be focused on the how to actually go to scale, how to accelerate. And I'll use one example. We've been talking about the need to improve building energy efficiency as probably the most cost-effective and easy win approach to reducing greenhouse gas emissions by reducing the need for generating electricity. And we know that across Asia, the major cities all have major opportunities for building energy efficiency initiatives, but we haven't figured out yet how to make that happen at scale. It's a difficult challenge, but I think this is an area of research that if somebody figures out how to pull together an initiative that can actually be rolled out at the city level or the national level or a sub-regional level for retrofitting buildings and making sure that new buildings are energy efficient, that would have a huge impact on both air quality at the urban level, at the city level. It would have a huge impact on the cost to countries and to individuals of investments in electricity and their actual electricity costs. And it would have a huge impact on the reduction of GHG emissions.
Many thanks, Warren, for your great time and great explanation. Many things what you mentioned today included in our book already, but not everything. So I hope the rest, the researchers who are working in this area can keep working. I think what you just said, it's very inspiring and have very clear direction for researchers. Thank you very much, Warren, and good luck with your trip to Egypt for COP27.
Thanks, Dina, and keep up the great work. You guys are doing wonderful work and are an excellent partner for us here at ADB. Thanks.
Thank you everyone for listening this video. This video was pre-recorded before COP27 started because Warren events currently in COP27 in Egypt. So let's move now to key takeaways from the book session, panel discussion. And the panel session will be moderated by Chief of Energy Sector Group, Sustainable Development and Climate Change Department of Asian Development Bank in Philippines by Priyantha Wijayatunga. He was the founder also before ADB. He was the founder of Director General of the Public Utilities Commission of Sri Lanka, and also Senior Professor of Electrical Engineering at the University in Sri Lanka. And he also holds doctorate degree in Power System Economics from the Imperial College. Priyantha, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dina, for that very generous introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you. Let me first of all welcome all of you, particularly the eminent researchers who are joining our panel discussion today. As you heard, this book launch is on climate change mitigation, policies and lessons for South Asia, for Asia. And as I understand, this is based on the ADBI annual conference of 2021. And the important key presentations made during that particular conference. So let me welcome once again all these important key researchers in these different areas. And the book consists of, as I understand, 5 different sections. Of course, overall 9 chapters, and dedicated to one section on energy sector, which of course I am in a way, like I may be able to contribute in terms of questions a little more in that. And then buildings, particularly on building energy efficiency, and then transport sector. And then, of course, the agriculture sector, which is a very important sector in terms of, climate change adaptation, as well as, of course, mitigation too. And then finally, one of the most important areas is carbon pricing. So these are the 5 different areas which have been picked up in the book. And naturally, we will be focusing on these 5 areas when it comes to the panel discussions. So we will have these eminent panelists, Dr. Venkatachalam Anbumoshi, Director of the Research and Strategy Innovations, the Economic Research Institute of ASEAN and East Asia, located in Indonesia. And then we have, of course, Dina Azagaliaeva. I hope I got the pronunciation right. Research Fellow from ADBI Japan. And then we have Professor Jing Fang from the Dean of the School of Economics and Management from Baina University, PRC. And then we have Adrina Inchuk, Senior Economist, Agri-Food Economics, Economic and Social Development Department, Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN from Italy. And then we have Dr. Paul Steele, Chief Economist, International Institute of Environment and Development, the UK. So as you can see, we have a very high-level, eminent panel to discuss different aspects contained in this book. Let me start off with, in the same order, with the transport sector. Let me go to Dr. Venkatachalam. Of course, as energy use in the transport sector naturally contributes 16% of total GHG emissions, and that means there is a good opportunity to reduce GHG emissions in the transport sector. And as I understand, you wrote the book on decarbonization in the transport sector. And based on your experience, let me request you to respond. What are your key takeaways on solutions for decarbonizing the transport sector, especially in relation to electric vehicles, and also any thing relating to biofuels the use in the transport sector. Over to you, Dr. Venkachalan. Yeah.
Dr. Vijay Tunga, thank you very much, and also congratulations to Dina and Dil for bringing out this book, which is very timely, and it also gives a lot of takeaways for the COP27 negotiations. Coming back to the question that is the transport sector, and what could be the pathways and what are the key messages? If you look into the chapter, and basically it tackles the growing emissions that is coming from the transport sector, which is calculated to be around 20% of the total regional emissions. Out of this 20%, and nearly 12% is coming from the road sector. In the Asia Pacific, it is increasing very fast. And then aviation sector, it is around 2%, and shipping around another 1.7%. Yes, the countries are getting integrated, and it is a trajectory is that it will be increasing. The transport sector will be more contributing for these emission profiles at the national level. So what we did in this chapter is basically we try to find out what type of transport modes and different type of fuel use will change this current trajectories, or that decarbonization of the transport sector with a more focus on the road sector. And second thing is we find what type of policies will influence this decarbonization. We found interesting results, and it's a kind of a new knowledge that is we derived, and we focused on the three emerging countries, Indonesia, India, and Thailand, and which has a very ambitious goals for the biofuel and these electrical vehicles. But when you do these scenarios, we found these three scenarios, and this going alone for the electrical vehicles, going alone for the biofuels, or going alone for this modern hydrogen fuels will not be effective, because there are cost-effective factors are there, and still some of the technologies need to reach the markets. So one thing is we need biofuels, we need electrical vehicles, and we need new type of fuels. And that is a kind of a scenario, there is a pragmatic scenario that the countries need to think about to reach their 2030 targets. Second thing is we do have challenges, particularly that the electrification of the vehicles, particularly the heavy commercial vehicles and the buses sector. And here we had challenges that need a new type of policy innovations and the technological observations. And when coming to these policies, and here we need to find a kind of integration of the policies. When we see there's a transport policies that also need to be linked to the industrial policy, that is, for example, electrical vehicle manufacturing policies, as well as the biofuel production, which has the stock problem challenges that is coming from the rural areas, particularly the agriculture sector. Here we need to find a kind of new policy interventions are needed in an integrated way. And this chapter also concludes that is this cost of investing on the EV infrastructure and the new type of standards for the biofuels need a kind of a new type of investments. And this type of investment, we also get into that what type of current financial models exist. And there are three messages that is coming from this book, and I repeat. And one thing is currently most of the biofuel policies are coming from the taxpayers' money. Basically, countries are subsidizing these biofuels, and it has to be market oriented. Second thing is EVs. There are some private sector investment are coming in the niche markets. They also use the kind of instruments like green bonds, but they are still in these early stages, and that need a lot of de-risking mechanisms. So it proposes that is the kind of way that is to move forward is we need to look for a kind of a blended finance where there is a current level of public funding is needed. And that has to be developed into a kind of new developmental assistance program where ADB is a player, and some kind of development assistance could be fine-tuned. And also we need to mobilize this private sector financing. This kind of blended financing is needed for decarbonizing the transport sector. And third point that is coming up is the takeaway message is in the international negotiations, this transport sector is not featured very well. And here we need, there are funding mechanisms that is available, but it has not been fully harnessed. Here we need much more advocacy, and knowing that is Asia Pacific, most of these future emissions will be coming from the transport sector. So I stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Venkatachalam. That's quite interesting. And let me now go to Dina. Dina, it's on buildings. And obviously, the buildings consists of a very important subsector in the economy when it comes to contribution to GHG emissions, therefore possibility of bringing down emissions. And not only building operations, but also building construction, which is very important. And you came up with this book chapter on green buildings, why green buildings are needed in Asia and how to promote them. Please see how we can do that. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Priyanka. Yeah, this chapter is written with my colleague Dil Rahut. We wrote together. So when we talk about climate change mitigation, many people think about immediately renewable energy. But for developing Asia, renewable energy cannot satisfy all our fast-growing energy demand, population growing, income growing, energy access is growing. More and more people buying AC conditioner for the first time in their life, which is good, right? People having better energy access and start buying AC, but that puts a big pressure on energy demand. So one thing is to decarbonize existing energy, and then energy demand is growing. That's even harder task for developing Asia. So renewable energy cannot be the only solution for developing Asia. We need to work on energy efficiency, and particularly energy efficiency in many countries, many developing countries, has lots area for improvement. So now one of the, like Priyanka mentioned, buildings, right? Buildings actually contribute like around 1/3 of pollution and greenhouse gas emissions, and around 1/3 of energy demand comes from buildings. So by decarbonizing building sector, we can actually make a huge change for emissions and for energy security. So emissions is not only for climate change mitigation, like Warren even said before, emissions also to make our cities more livable, health, also improve our health, right? Because some cities, you know, many cities in developing Asia are very polluted. Yeah, so green buildings can actually help to improve the situation in cities. Green buildings, they are not the same as energy efficient buildings. So many countries actually got energy efficiency standards for buildings, so that's fine. So the next step, if countries want to be more ambitious, they can implement strategies for green buildings, which most developing countries don't have it yet. For example, Singapore has, but not many countries have. So I think countries can think of more ambitious green buildings standards, not just energy efficiency standards. So green buildings, actually, they don't need to look green. Many people think green buildings like the one who got lots of trees, solar panel on top. Actually, no. Green buildings, no need to have solar panels, no need to have trees. They could be very gray, very boring, but they use resources efficiently, and they construct it with lower emissions. So if you know, construction requires a lot of steel and cement. They're not carbon intensive or energy intensive, but they're huge, especially developing Asia, right? A few years ago in my city, whole area was empty, and then I come now, it's like another city. There are so many buildings, so much construction. So this is very typical for developing Asia. So if steel and cement are among the most carbon intensive industrial materials, and if cement industry were a country, it would be the 3rd largest emitter in the world. And So some countries actually started to promote green construction material. So that started with COP26 last year to promote green construction materials. So solutions are there. Not all of them are cheap, but they are there and they keep developing. There is a lot of research and development going. So for construction material, how can we decarbonize construction, make it less polluting? This by reducing construction material, reusing, recycling construction material, and replacing with green. So there are solutions. So how to make construction cleaner? That's using the 4 R's. There are lots of benefits of green buildings, not just for climate change mitigation, not just to prevent catastrophic climate change, but also for satisfy energy demand, for energy security, which is a very big problem this year, for efficient use of resources, for reducing pollution in cities. So there are a number of benefits. There are, of course, there are some barriers for financing green buildings. Some of these barriers unique for buildings. However, there are also solutions. For example, green bonds. Green bonds can be used for financing green buildings. And actually in Southeast Asia, it was a very popular source of financing green buildings. Particularly popular in Southeast Asia. Why? Because probably hot and humid tropical climate, which allows payback period to make it shorter, because green buildings in Southeast Asia would need, for example, energy efficient cooling every day of the year. There is no seasonality. And also, so green bonds can be used for financing green buildings. They just need to meet any national or internationally recognized green building standards, and they can be used for financing using green bonds. So not only green bonds, also green sukuk. Green sukuk is Islamic finance. It's called Islamic green bond as well. Also used for financing green buildings. Example here include this Merdeka Tower in Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur, which used green bonds for financing. Currently, it's a construction period, and what's written in the report is that the recycling, like 99% of waste is recycled. Thank you very much. Looking forward to questions.
Thank you very much, Dina, for that quick but very nice overview of what you have written and what you have included in the book. Next, let me go to Professor Yingfang, and this is going to be on the experience in carbon pricing. Let me, say that that she wrote this book chapter on exploiting complementarity of carbon pricing instruments for decarbonization in People's Republic of China. Based on that, it would be great if we could elaborate more on what lessons can we learn from carbon pricing in PRC for the benefit of other developing Asia, the other developing countries in Asia, so that we can eventually take it to them too. I mean, you have a lot of lessons which we could have probably learned from. Over to you, Professor Fang.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. It's my great honor to join this meeting. And also we are honored to take this opportunity to have our paper included in the book, ADBI book, which is focused on climate change mitigation, focus on policies and lessons for Asia. And in this book, we contribute our recent finished paper. To mitigate climate change, actually, many countries have adopted carbon pricing policies, either via emission trading scheme or a carbon tax. So far, around 67 carbon pricing initiatives have been already in place or are scheduled for implementation in the world. In China, the national emission trading scheme was announced by the end of 2017, which is becoming the world's largest carbon market, and started operating in July 2021. Following World Bank's report, In 2021, around 21% of global greenhouse gas emissions are covered by carbon pricing instrument in operation. Among those, 7.38% contributed by China's national emission trading scheme. In China's emission trading, national emission trading scheme, there are 8 industries to be included. Among those, power generation sector have been included, and the other 7 sectors, such as petrochemical sector, building materials, steel and iron, non-ferrous material, paper making, domestic civil aviation, will be covered at near future. So that's the background. And the motivation of our paper is to explore the impact of carbon pricing to support the practice of climate change mitigation policies. And the first aim of carbon pricing is encourage institutions to reduce greenhouse gas through a market-based mechanism to optimize resources allocation and achieve maximum ecological and economic benefits at the lowest possible social cost. And the second aim of emission trading scheme is to provide incentives for utilizing low carbon technologies and improving energy efficiency. However, there is great uncertainty regarding this aim. Emission trading scheme will not capture all potential emission sources due to high market operation costs, which is called transaction cost, such as emissions from household, transportation, and the service sectors. Another reason is the experiences of the EU ETS also show that the impact of emission trading scheme on low carbon technology innovation and energy efficiency has not been that significant. Yeah, so we may need additional policy instruments work together with emission trading scheme. In our paper, we developed and apply a multi-regional CGE model. We investigate the impacts of different policy portfolios or CO2 emissions, social costs, interregional factor, mobility, and sector outputs and structures and so on. As a major carbon price instrument, we include emission trading scheme, carbon tax, and the subsidy to energy efficient vehicles, which is representative of a subsidy to low carbon technology. So finally, we analyze the impact of this policy portfolio, different portfolios on the GDP, welfare, emission reduction, industry impacts, and the regional impacts. Yeah, so we get following conclusions. Compared with a separate carbon tax policy, the GDP losses caused by the emission trading scheme or a combination of ETS in the carbon tax policies are less, especially in some central and western regions. And the ETS performs better in promoting transfer of labor and capital from the eastern regions to central and western regions. In terms of sector output change, policy portfolios will cause less output decreases. However, the industrial structure adjustment is more significant when a carbon tax is put in place, especially when combined with subsidies for energy efficient vehicles. Then we have following policy recommendations. Yeah, national emission trading scheme certainly has its advantages on social costs in the regional equity, but is less effective in industry structure adjustment in emission reductions in those sectors which are not included in emission trading scheme. A policy portfolio could achieve the same emission reduction target with more moderate impacts. Therefore, implementation of a carbon tax for non-emission trading scheme sectors or a subsidy for energy efficient vehicles could be considered as supplementary policies for emission trading scheme in China. Finally, the practice of Chinese nationwide emission trading scheme have provided more experience. For example, rate-based allowance allocation, which shows better fit during different stage of economic cycle, especially during current situation of COVID-19. So I believe we will have more and better experience during carbon pricing practice in Asian countries, as well as in the world. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Fung. That's quite interesting. And I will come back to you with more questions probably in the second round. Let's see you know how it works in China and how we can bring it to the other countries. Next, let's see. We will go to Dr. Edrina Inchuk, this is of course on the agriculture sector, which is very different to the other sector we just talked about, and how what are the key takeaway solutions on decarbonizing the agriculture sector, and how successfully can we implement this in the developing Asia? That's my question to Dr. Inchuk. Please, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and very good afternoon from rainy Rome. So today, well, for those ones who are in Rome and also who are in Europe, very good morning. First of all, let me say a few words of appreciation for being invited to this meeting and to be allowed to read the very interesting chapter of the book, and to ADBI for organizing such an event, and especially to Dina and Dil. Thank you very much. It's really a great pleasure to be here with you. Let me very quickly share my presentation with you, because can you confirm that you see it? Yeah, okay, perfect. Because this is an organized way to kind of, refer to both to the book and to make a few points that, this book inspired while I read, especially the chapter of agriculture. So what we've learned and what we kind of read, and I think this is especially important in the pre-COP discussion, is to really understand the role of agriculture in, first of all, contributing to the problem, but also on the other hand in trying to provide some solution to the problem of global warming. So agriculture, the whole land use sector, contributes to approximately 24, so it's almost a quarter of global emissions. And apparently, from the emissions from the agriculture in Asia are the kind of the biggest share of the whole total agricultural emissions, which account to 44%. So there's a lot of things to be done in your region, actually. So this is something that, already kind of resonates in thinking, what potentially can be done in order to mitigate the problem. So we know a couple of measures that are very often, being spoken in within the sector, and kind of once you read, information about mitigation agriculture, you see a lot of, measures to be done in the water management. And this is especially important for Asia because there's a big share of the emissions are coming from rice production, not only that. So all sorts of water management techniques, including the alternative wetting and drying, or lasering the land in order for water to gravitate slowly. Another set of measures involve conservation agriculture, of course, agroforestry. That's something that is actually, often on the agenda of many practitioners. Soil network management. There's another very important point that is being very highly debatable right now with regards to the livestock management. in terms of, what should we do? There's a lot of stories about, should we also adjust our diet, how to do it, how to practice, how to price appropriately, meat that are high carbon condensation, and of course, agroforestry and afforestation. But then, we know it from kind of less of a practitioner point of view. So let's try to, think about, once we are to do something, how to do things. And in my team, part of my team is working exactly on that to help the big investment institutions like ADB, among others, the World Bank, of course, FAO, and many others on how to invest smartly. So where should we put our limited resources in order to achieve the highest benefits in terms of greenhouse gas mitigation? We often, we actually, probably it's $1 billion that pass by our desks now, and with the question, what should we do in order to achieve various sort of benefits? And just please bear in mind that so far, majority of projects are not really targeting directly mitigation, but they are targeted mainly issues like food security, or poverty reduction, or overarching agricultural transformation. And for most of those projects, including greenhouse gas mitigation, is a kind of a secondary issue. Nevertheless, many big financial organizations are already paying more and more attention to mitigation as well. So what we do sometimes, we are actually helping them to understand, what are the most cost-efficient measures in particular region for particular subsector of agriculture, and we are constantly building on our databases to help them reach the goal with the least resources. So investing smartly, but what I think the biggest point of this talk, and I really something that I really want to resonate with you: investing smartly while monitoring and evaluating the outcomes. So this is where actually the reality, the theory hits the reality, because most of the time when we help those big investors in assessing what are the mitigation potentials, we are trying to do it prior to the project, and in some cases we also do it when the project ends. And actually there's in majority of cases, a big disproportion between what was assessed prior to the project of how the project is going to contribute to greenhouse gas emissions, and when the project is finished. So that's something that is that I want to for all of you to pay attention. This is something very related also to carbon markets, because how are you going to determine how much of greenhouse gas emissions are going to be actually really reduced through particular projects, through particular investments? It's very hard. It's really hard, and it really makes me often when I'm actually doing those type of analysis, it really makes me think of how potentially agriculture can be, well introduced into whole carbon markets. So just aside, we do it a lot with the both post-assessment and ex-ante and post-exposed assessment with the exact suite of tools, which actually ADB is starting to use, and we are actually starting our larger collaboration. So my key takeaways: it's very important to measure, and one more time measure, because we really need to know what is available, but also how in practice it ends up on contributing to the mitigation goal. Encourage also small, relatively non-costly changes. This is very easy to do, and still many times those big investors don't do that. They want to go immediately for those big, big changes. But while we are opting for the big changes, we should be also thinking about, doing a small low-cost changes. Investing, of course, in cost-effective activities, and this is something we'll be very happy to help anyone with, and of course, provide incentives smartly. and increase the synergies and reduce trade-offs. And this is something that is another important key point of that of what I wanted to bring it today to this venue, because often once we are focusing on solving one problems, we're creating other problems. So this is something that we all have to be aware of. So with that, I hope I was within the time limit. Many thanks, and I'm looking forward to our further discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ingchuk. And that's quite interesting. And in fact, for somebody who has been in the energy sector, agriculture sector is so fascinating because I know very little of it. And but when it comes to solutions and the issues and the solution, is quite very interesting. Thank you very much for that elaborate presentation.
Thank you.
Let me now go into a second round. I haven't seen any questions coming from the audience as yet. Probably that means we have time for a second round. Of course, I have not shared these questions beforehand, so it's going to be quite interesting, off the cuff, off the record, off the cuff, responses. In fact, one thing what I would like to ask from Dr. Venkatachalam is that, you talked about the mitigation through things like electric vehicles, biofuels, and so on. And where is the modal shift, placed in this mitigation, scenario in the transport sector? Because, one of the things what we always push in, for instance, in places like ADB, moving from private vehicles to public transport. But of course, public transport itself may have its own issues when it comes to implementation in these countries. And that's why in most of the developing countries, people opt for private transport because it's not easy sometimes to get to public transport, implemented very fast. Any thoughts on that modal shift, how you encourage and how much of impact it has already got?
Very intruding and very complex question. And here we are living in Asia, and Asia very well. And here owning your vehicle is a kind of pride, and that is the personal vehicles is also kind of comfort and luxury, and how much you are in the social ladder. I think the people who moved from bicycle to two-wheeler and two-wheeler to four-wheeler, they don't come down, and it is always a kind of social engineering process towards the prosperity, and at the same time, and we know that is this multimodal transport. We know that is how it is efficient, and I think ADB is helping this critical investment that is coming in the countries, and that has the kind of a core benefits, how it helps to avoid this congestion, but still you have that kind of a comfort of traveling, and is a combination of traveling private mode and then public mode and coming back to, and here it is more to be done, and third one is also you have some best cases, and we need a kind of growth, and where that is the type of electrical vehicles. They produce some kind of a clean or near clean type of industries, and where that is the automotive industries could be transformed, and where if you are buying a car, and this car could be first one car could be a kind of a carbon neutral car, and there is opportunities for it. So my take is here, and you need to feel this appetite and the aspirations of the people, and they should be given these services, better infrastructure, and on the other way, basically in the urban areas, and this multimodal transport will help, and that need critical investments.
Thank you very much, Dr. Venkatachalam, that those insightful, views. Yeah, that's very true. I mean, we always, yeah, please.
One more thing is, I think still we need to think about, and we are working on it, and this power of digital tools and this artificial intelligence, and this kind of a mechanism that is how you can optimize your travel distances, how you can optimize your choice of the vehicles and your mode of things. And here I think there is a unleashing potential is coming up, and it has been, we have seen it during the COVID period. And still, we need to look into it. We need to zoom in and what are the possibilities of decarbonizing the transport sector with this aid of this digital tools, and also this how to integrate this product and the service offering. And this is one area that is, I think there is a huge potential exists, and we need to look into it.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that's very true. I mean, you have the ability to share vehicles when you hire vehicles, you know that, and that's available in Uber, in PickMe, and all these different apps. So digital services can play a very important role. And at the end of the day, as long as the same service can be provided through a less emission mode, that's the best way to move forward. And so, yeah, thank you very much for those very important insights. Let me now switch to Dina on buildings. In fact, long time ago, I used to be involved a little bit on this, building codes and so on back in my own country. And I just wanted to check with you when it comes to engaging with the governments on these building codes and making these buildings energy efficient, green, and so on. I must say how difficult it is to engage with these governments, and also particularly with the architects. I can remember those days. Architects are quite reluctant on lots of these new technologies which come up with, simply because it might not go well with the architectural aspect of buildings. So what is your experience and thoughts on that?
Thank you very much, Prianta, for a very interesting question. Actually, yeah, I wish we had more green buildings in developing Asia. I fell in love with green buildings while living in Singapore, I think, and especially working at National University of Singapore, which has several green buildings. And they even have net zero carbon building. So for net zero carbon building, actually designers, architects is like crucial, it's must. You cannot avoid without architects for designing net zero carbon buildings. But for green buildings, actually, not necessarily doesn't have to be. You can take the existing buildings and retrofit it to make it green. So even existing buildings. So I think architect and design is not a big issue for green buildings. Of course, it's nice, yeah. For net zero carbon, it is essential, but net zero carbon be too expensive and cannot be like widely available. They just like some cases for demonstration. But I think green buildings can be used for what Warren even said, we need scalability, right? Because projects become cost effective if you can make it to scale. So once country has developing green building standard is very difficult, right? Like you said, cold, very difficult because it depends on climate, but depends on local conditions, right? Some countries use heating, some countries don't use heating. And also how to make the building remain green even after 10 years, how to make sure it is still green, right? So this process is difficult, and actually we can learn, I recommend to learn from Singaporean experience. So how they developed with codes and standards, they first made data submission mandatory. So first submitting data mandatory. So then they use this data in order to develop, first codes were voluntary, then moving to compulsory. So the timeline is actually quite long for developing own codes, but I think the benefits are great enough to have these green building standards. Actually, countries can adopt even international green building standards, but I think it's good to have also local in order to consider the local conditions as well. And especially like last my visit in ADB Manila, I noticed that ADB building is green. It was retrofitted, right? Originally, when it was built, Probably people didn't have in mind about green. I don't know. I wasn't living at that time. I don't know anything, but it was retrofitted to the standards code needs to meet green building standards.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dina. Yes, you're right. Now it's a green building, and at the time of construction, obviously this was not the fashion at that time. So now it's a green building. Yeah, it's quite interesting. I can still remember about almost 30 years ago when we wanted, after an energy audit, to refit the lighting. At that time, efficient lighting was the only and the easiest thing to do in a particular hotel. In fact, the architect was up in arms. He didn't want to have any of the compact fluorescent lamps at the time because it was of a different color, because warm white was not available. So for the architects, warm white is the color when it comes to most of the buildings and the gardens and so on. So I can remember we had a long fight with the architect. So now it's not there because the technology has developed, and you basically get all what you really want if you want to make it green. Thank you very much, Dina. That's excellent. Coming to Professor Fang, I just want to check with you when it comes to carbon pricing in PRC. Were you, targeting on, or is PRC targeting on specific subsectors in the economy when it comes to carbon pricing, or is it economy across the board? If that is the case, or if you are talking about specific subsectors, where do you find the most difficult sector to focus on when it comes to carbon pricing, but still the most important? Thank you.
Thank you. Our leader has announced our target. We have emission peak before 2030, and we'll reach carbon neutrality before 2060. So to reach that target, we have different policies. First, the emission trading scheme is a cost-effective mechanism. So now emission trading scheme
Priyanka, you're muted.
Yeah, back. Okay.
Sorry. So now we have target now, the national target. So to reach that target, we have different policies. The first is the emission trading scheme, which is considered as a cost-effective mechanism. So now we have a national emission trading scheme and they're complemented. So actually, besides, we have other schemes like a renewable energy support program, in energy efficiency improved program, and so on. So the key is how to coordinate these multi policies to ensure each policy is effective. So now we have a rate-based allowance allocation scheme. So under this allocation method, we can have every policy to practice well. And so this rate-based allocation method can encourage firms with advanced technology to have less burden to reduce and so produce more. And those firms with outdated technology have heavier burden, and these firms can take more actions to reduce. So in this way, we can encourage all the firms to take low carbon technology. Yeah, that's our policy origin. Yeah, so this I think this flexible policy combination and a flexible allowance allocation approach can make our emission trading scheme to practice better with other policies together. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Thank you very much, Professor Fang. It's quite interesting that you have various options to pick up from the best for your own subsector if you really want to implement certain things. That's really good. Excellent point. Let me now go to Dr. Inchuk on agriculture. And now, in fact, interestingly, when I was working on a technical assistance project in India on biofuels, I can still remember the first question what they asked was, how it's going to interact with the agriculture sector. How come you propose biofuels as a solution when all these biofuels will take up all the land for agriculture? So how do you look at this? Of course, I'm pretty sure Dr. Venkatachalam also can chip in if necessary on this. Biofuels and agriculture, these two sides from the viewpoint of the agriculture sector.
Thank you very much. Well, it's a question that probably has been well answered in the literature from the perspective of agriculture after the problem. I mean, after what was it? After 2007, right? 2007 was this big thing. 2008, the big issue with biofuels that practically explained to a large extent the rises in prices, right, of agricultural commodity, of main grains in principle. So I think we've learned from that experience, and from I always say, do what you can do that doesn't really harm. So there is a scope for biofuels, or actually, and that was really a long time ago already when I was doing my PhD. I did work with a person who was proposing to actually create a lot of chemicals, so biochemicals from grass and from other agricultural, let's say, commodities. And that made a lot of sense. However, of course, there is always a demand for it. There's very hardly ever, something that is there and nobody's using it, or there is no use for any of the kind of product or byproducts of particular commodities. So I say, if possible, when possible, it's very good to use byproducts or other things from agriculture sector in order to create energy. However, especially now when our world is, let's say, touched by different sort of conflicts, and there is issue with achieving the food security in the whole world. I would say that this type of debate would have a very hard ground to be restarted. We are already trying to see how to ensure that the grains that we have are being properly distributed, so we are not causing problems while trying to solve another one. And that is always the same, very often, especially from the kind of technicians, and from the economist side, we always think about trade-offs. From the technician side, there is a problem, let's solve it. Yeah, but this creates other problems. Well, the others should be solving it, right? So we have to be very careful on that. While all the time trying and thinking, because I think thinking and trying, it's necessary, especially when we are now facing this big problem of the climate change. We need to try and do something, but we always have to be careful, while how we are solving issues, because we may end up in much bigger troubles, than before. So yeah. I shall say that that will be my 5 cents to that discussion now.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Edwina. That's very true. In fact, one of the questions which we now grapple with in our part of the world is that increasingly, because of the cost reduction in renewables and the great demand for electricity and so on, lots of fertile agricultural land are being taken up by these developers, and in fact it has got its own social issues, frankly, in these countries. And even about 10-15 years ago, I can still remember these hydropower dams, the release of water for agriculture and for irrigation, right? And there is always a compromise between releasing it for irrigation and using it for energy. So there's a long-running conflict between the two sectors. And yeah.
Always. Yeah, exactly. Water is another issue. Huh? It's actually maybe even more, important in some places than the energy issues. But you are absolutely right. We need to be very aware of those and trying to really look for synergies, where they are. Like, just to give you an example, we're working recently on a big scale project for the social protection. So there were money being, given to people, to the poorest of the poor, in order to let them have a kind of a decent life. And there was a very small changes needed in order to actually for them to do a much better agricultural practices that were actually contributing also to mitigation targets, with just doing a little twist. So rather than thinking, about creating even more trade, or trying to think, how can we add on something in order to actually achieve more than one goal? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think that's all the time we have for this session. Let me thank all the eminent panelists for excellent contributions. And of course, the book everybody should read. And I'm sure that's going to be very, very useful for all of us, the newcomers in the field, as well as the old hands. And this will be very, very useful when it comes to particularly institutions like ADB will use this to take it to the DMCs. And the most important thing is that we always should pick up the low-hanging fruits first before we really think of big complex approaches to things when it comes to mitigation financing in climate-related interventions. So with that note, let me thank once again to all of you and to ADBI for bringing me in to moderate this session. Back to you, Dina. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Priyanta, and all panelists for excellent takeaways from the book, summarizing. Yeah, thank you very much. So let's invite Dil Rahut, who is Vice Chair of Research and Senior Research Fellow of ADBI. And he's also co-editor of the book and author of one of the chapters. I said, Dil, please, the floor is yours for closing remarks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dina. First of all, I'd like to thank Deputy Dean Beck, Sinji Beck, for his keynote and introducing opening the sessions. Thank you very much. And I shouldn't forget to thank Dr. Priyatham. Dr. Priyatham, I think there wouldn't be anyone who could better chair these panel discussions, and you're wonderful. Although you have specialized in energy, but your discussion shows that you know a lot about agriculture, you know a lot about transport sector. In fact, I mean, the entire gamut of climate change. Thank you very much for finding time to be with us and sharing this session. Thank you very much, Dr. Priyatham. And of course, I mean, Anbu just left. Thank you, Anbu, for being with us and providing a wonderful background about the transport sectors. You have worked extensively in this sector, so you're able to bring out very interesting views. And of course, I mean, Dina, my colleague, we got these chapters. Thank you so much, Dina. And the view that you brought about on this green building is very valuable. It's not only about constructing building which is environmentally friendly, but also going back to the construction material, using more clean material. So that was wonderful. And Dr. Yingfeng, thank you very much for the very interesting discussions around carbon markets, carbon pricing. That's a very important issues, and that has been very less talk about. And this is I think the need of the hour. And of course, I mean, Adriana, my friend, thank you very much for making your time and being with us. I know you're very busy, but thank you very much. And Adriana, you have such a extensive experience on agriculture. You have worked so much in so many different countries. You really, I think, there couldn't be anyone better than you to talk about agriculture. So that's the reason why we wanted to have you. Thank you very much, Adriana. And of course, I mean, I'd like to thank Kimiko-san. She has been working extensively to make this happen, and day in and day out. From the time when we started the conference, she has worked very hard. So I'd also like to thank Kumiko-san. And from, one thing that we could take from this panel discussions is that, we really need to be very comprehensive in the sense that we should not only look at one sector, we should look at all the sectors, and we should try and find synergy and see how we can tackle the problem of climate change. We should not look at the sectors in isolations. By looking at the sectors in isolations, I don't think we'll be able to achieve zero carbon emissions. And it's very important that we expedite the process of achieving net carbon emission. I come from a country which is carbon negative, and I always feel very happy about it. Although we are very small, I think because we are small, we are able to do that. But then the bigger country is a bigger challenge because the economy is large and GHG emission is large. So I'm sure very soon in coming decades or so, we'll all be able to achieve net zero carbon emission. Thank you very much. With this, I'd like to pass back the floor to Dina.
Many thanks to you for excellent closing remarks. Yeah, thanks to all distinguished speakers. I hope we interested our audience to download this book and open it. So please, it's free book. Please spread it, share, link, and hopefully we have many readers. Yeah, thank you so much. So I'm gonna play just our promoting video. I think, yeah. If anyone wants to say something, please say now before we play video.